Get your filthy hands off him. Vanessa Brooks screamed as the plate of hot food crashed onto the sidewalk. The rich guests outside Brooks Holdings turned their heads at once. Naomi Carter froze beside the marble entrance, her faded cafe uniform stained with soup, her hands shaking around the empty bread bag she had bought with her last few dollars. The blind beggar beside the gate lowered his head silently. "I was only feeding him," Naomi whispered. "He has not eaten all day." Vanessa laughed coldly. Diamonds glittered around her neck. Cameras from guests and influencers pointed straight at Naomi's tearful face. "You embarrassed this family in front of investors for a beggar?" Vanessa snapped. "Poor people always bring dirt wherever they go." A few guests laughed under their breath. One woman lifted her phone higher. Another shook her head with disgust. Naomi looked down at the blind man sitting beside the giant black gate. His coat was old. His hands were rough. Rainwater dripped from the edge of his sleeve. But every day for months, she had quietly brought him food before her shift. Every day. Even when she skipped meals herself. "Please," Naomi said softly. "Do not throw him out tonight. The storm is coming." Vanessa stepped closer until Naomi could smell expensive perfume mixed with cruelty. "And who are you to speak here?" she hissed. "A broke waitress with unpaid bills and a dying mother?" Naomi's face collapsed for 1 second. Just one. The crowd noticed. The shame spread across her like fire. In her torn handbag were hospital bills for Gloria Carter's heart medication. Rent notices. A cracked phone that barely worked. Naomi swallowed hard and lowered her voice. "I only wanted to help him." "Help?" Vanessa scoffed. "People like you only help yourselves." The blind man suddenly tightened his grip around a silver cane. His expression changed for a second when Naomi's bag slipped open. An old photograph almost fell onto the wet pavement before Naomi grabbed it quickly. The blind man tilted his head slightly, as if he recognized something. "Interesting," one guest whispered. "She keeps pictures in that broken bag like treasure." Naomi crouched beside the beggar and tried to hand him another piece of bread she had hidden in her pocket. A security guard stepped forward immediately. "Ma'am, you need to leave." "Please," Naomi begged, her voice cracking now. "My mother is in the hospital. I need this job. I cannot lose it." "Then maybe you should stop acting like a street girl," Vanessa said sharply. "Kneeling beside trash." The words hit harder than the rain beginning to fall. Naomi slowly lowered her eyes. Around her, wealthy guests in black suits stood beneath warm golden lights while she trembled in soaked shoes and a faded apron. The blind beggar suddenly spoke for the first time all night. His voice was calm. Deep. Controlled. "She fed me when nobody else would." The crowd fell silent for one brief moment. Naomi looked at him in shock. Vanessa quickly cut him off with a laugh. "And now the beggar speaks," she mocked. "Wonderful entertainment for the gala." A younger employee near the entrance looked uncomfortable, almost ready to defend Naomi. But one sharp look from Vanessa silenced him instantly. Phone stayed raised. Nobody moved. Nobody helped. Naomi wiped her tears fast, trying to hold on to the last piece of dignity she had left. Then Vanessa pointed toward the gate. "Throw both of them out." Security grabbed Naomi's arm. Her bag fell open again. Papers scattered across the wet marble. Hospital bills. Medicine receipts. And one old photograph face down in the rain. The blind beggar suddenly leaned forward as if he sensed it. His hand trembled. Beneath his torn sleeve, a luxury watch flashed for 1 second under the lightning. The Brooks family crest was engraved into the metal. Naomi stared at it. So did Vanessa. Then, from the darkness beyond the gate, a black luxury car stopped suddenly beside the sidewalk. The blind man slowly lifted his face toward Naomi and spoke in a low voice that made Vanessa's smile disappear. "Naomi Carter," he said quietly. "Where did you get that photograph?" The black luxury car stopped beside the flooded sidewalk. Rain hit the windows in slow heavy drops. Every guest near the Brooks Holdings gate fell silent for 1 second. Naomi Carter stood frozen beside the security guards, her soaked uniform clinging to her shaking body. The blind beggar still sat quietly near the gate, one hand resting on the silver cane with the Brooks family crest. "Naomi Carter," he repeated softly. "Where did you get that photograph?" Vanessa Brooks stepped forward immediately. "Do not answer him," she snapped. "He is manipulating you." Naomi looked confused. Hurt. Exhausted. Her fingers tightened around the wet photograph she had tried to hide. The blind man tilted his head toward the sound of her breathing, almost like he recognized something deeper than her voice. "My mother gave it to me," Naomi whispered carefully. "That is all I know." Vanessa laughed sharply. "Listen to her. Every poor liar suddenly has a dramatic story." A few wealthy guests chuckled again, but not as loudly this time. The black car door opened slowly. A tall man in a dark suit stepped out holding an umbrella. Marcus Reed. Elijah's personal assistant. Vanessa's smile weakened for half a second before returning. Marcus walked directly toward the blind beggar without speaking. Then he leaned down slightly. "Sir," he said quietly. Naomi noticed the respect in his voice immediately. So did Vanessa. Elijah slowly stood up from the wet pavement. His coat was old, but the way Marcus treated him did not match a homeless man. Naomi stared silently as Marcus tried to hand Elijah a dry coat. Elijah refused it with one small movement. His blind eyes turned back toward Naomi instead. "Your mother," Elijah said calmly. "What is her name?" Naomi hesitated. The rain became louder around them. "Gloria Carter." Elijah's hand tightened suddenly around the silver cane. Marcus looked up fast. Vanessa quickly interrupted. "Enough." Her voice cut through the silence like glass. "This girl is trying to use sympathy to get close to the Brooks family." "I am not," Naomi whispered. "I only wanted him to eat." "Poor people always say that before asking for money," Vanessa replied coldly. Naomi lowered her eyes again. The humiliation returned immediately. Around her stood luxury cars, black umbrellas, expensive gowns, security guards with earpieces. Around her stood people who never worried about hospital bills or empty refrigerators. But Naomi's mother was alone in a weak apartment across the city, waiting for medicine Naomi still could not afford tonight. Elijah suddenly turned toward Marcus again. "Take note of that name," he said quietly. Vanessa's face changed instantly. Tiny fear. Tiny panic. Gone in 1 second. Naomi noticed it anyway. A young boy selling newspapers under the train bridge nearby slowly stepped closer through the rain. Jaden. He looked at Naomi nervously. "Miss Naomi," he said softly. "That blind man always keeps your food wrappers in his bag." The crowd murmured immediately. Vanessa snapped her head toward the boy. "Get out of here." Jaden backed away fast. Elijah remained silent for a long moment. Then he asked one more question. "Why did you help me every day?" Naomi looked down at her wet shoes before answering. "Because nobody should eat alone in the rain." Silence. Real silence this time. Even Marcus looked shaken. Elijah's expression did not change, but his fingers slowly brushed against the old luxury watch beneath his torn sleeve. Something in Naomi's words hit an old wound deep inside him. For one brief second, it looked like he remembered someone else. Someone long gone. If you are listening right now, tell me where you are watching from, and tell me honestly. Do you believe Naomi is telling the truth? Vanessa stepped forward again before the silence could grow dangerous. "Security," she ordered coldly. "Remove her from this property permanently." Naomi's eyes filled again. "Please," she begged softly. "I need this job. My mother needs medicine tonight." "That is not my problem," Vanessa replied. Security moved closer immediately. Marcus looked uncertain, almost ready to speak. Elijah lifted one hand slightly. The guard stopped for 1 second. Tiny hope. Just 1 second. Then Vanessa leaned closer to Elijah and whispered sharply, "You are letting a stranger manipulate you again." Again. Marcus looked at Vanessa immediately after hearing that word. Elijah turned his blind face slowly toward her. The air changed. Naomi felt it too, though she did not understand why. Then her cracked phone suddenly rang inside her wet bag. Naomi answered quickly with trembling hands. A weak coughing voice came through the speaker. "Naomi," Gloria whispered painfully. "The medicine, please hurry." Naomi's face collapsed completely. She turned away, ashamed of crying in front of strangers. Elijah listened silently to Gloria's voice through the phone speaker. His expression changed again. Slowly. Deeply. "Gloria Carter," he repeated under his breath. Marcus suddenly pulled a small tablet from his coat and stared at something on the screen. His eyes widened. "Sir," he whispered carefully. "There is an old file connected to that name." Vanessa's face lost color for the first time that night. And before Naomi could walk away into the rain, Elijah spoke again in a low controlled voice that stopped everyone cold. "Bring Naomi Carter to me privately," he ordered. "Tonight." Naomi Carter stood silently beside the black luxury car, rainwater still dripping from the edges of her faded cleaning uniform. Marcus Reed opened the back door carefully. "Mr. Elijah wants to speak with you privately," he said. Naomi looked terrified instead of relieved. Across the mansion gate, Vanessa Brooks crossed her arms tightly. Her expensive diamond earrings caught the light while Naomi held her cracked phone with shaking fingers. "This is insane," Vanessa snapped. "She is a random street girl." Elijah remained calm beside the car, his blind eyes fixed forward. "Bring her," he repeated quietly. Naomi swallowed hard before stepping inside. The leather seat smelled richer than anything she had ever touched. Her wet shoes left marks on the spotless floor mat. She tried to hide them with her feet immediately. Marcus noticed but said nothing. The car moved slowly through the city while Naomi clutched the old photograph against her chest. Elijah sat across from her in silence for several seconds. "How long has your mother been sick?" he finally asked. Naomi looked down. "Almost 2 years. And you still fed a blind stranger every day?" Naomi's voice cracked softly. "Hunger feels worse when nobody sees you." Elijah's fingers tightened again around the silver cane. Silence filled the car after that. Heavy silence. Outside the windows, expensive buildings slowly disappeared into darker streets, broken signs, and flooded sidewalks. Naomi noticed Marcus quietly searching old records on his tablet beside the driver. Every few seconds, he glanced back toward her with growing confusion. Tiny hope began to appear inside Naomi for the first time that night. Then her phone suddenly died in her hands. The cracked screen went black. "No," she whispered under her breath. "My mother is alone." Elijah turned his head slightly toward Marcus. "Take her home first." Vanessa's voice suddenly exploded through Marcus's phone speaker. She had called him directly. "Do not take that girl anywhere near him again," she shouted. "You do not know who she really is." Elijah remained calm. Too calm. "Neither do you," he answered quietly before ending the call himself. Naomi stared at him in shock. Nobody had ever defended her in front of powerful people before. The car finally stopped outside a narrow apartment building with leaking pipes and broken balcony rails. Naomi looked embarrassed immediately. "I am sorry," she whispered. "This place is not safe." Elijah finished gently. Naomi said nothing. Upstairs, Gloria Carter lay coughing beneath a thin blanket inside a tiny room with flickering lights. Empty medicine bottles covered the small table beside her bed. The landlord stood near the door impatiently. "Tomorrow morning," he warned coldly. "If rent does not come, both of you leave." Naomi lowered her head instantly. "Please. Just one more week." "Begging does not pay bills," the landlord replied before walking away. Elijah remained near the doorway listening silently while Marcus looked around the apartment in visible discomfort. There was almost no food. Rain leaked through one corner of the ceiling into a metal bucket. Naomi quickly tried hiding overdue hospital bills beneath a towel. Too late. Elijah heard the papers crumple. Gloria suddenly looked toward Elijah's direction weakly. Her breathing changed. "That voice," she whispered painfully. Naomi rushed beside her mother immediately. "Mama, please rest." But Gloria slowly reached for Elijah's hand with trembling fingers. "You sound like him." Elijah froze completely. Marcus looked up fast. Naomi stared between them in confusion. Gloria coughed harder before whispering one strange sentence that made the entire room still. "The boy from Lakewood Manor." Elijah slowly lowered himself into a chair beside the bed. For the first time, his calm expression cracked slightly. "How do you know that name?" he asked quietly. Gloria's weak eyes filled with fear instead of relief. She looked toward Naomi immediately. "Close the door," she whispered urgently. "Before somebody hears." Tiny hope returned for one dangerous second. Then loud knocking suddenly exploded downstairs. Angry voices followed. Vanessa Brooks had sent security guards to the apartment building. Naomi's face lost all color. Marcus immediately stepped toward the window. "Sir," he said carefully. "They found her." And while Naomi held her coughing mother tightly in the leaking apartment, Marcus quietly pulled an old digital file onto his screen. A faded photo slowly appeared beside Naomi's face. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. Marcus slowly turned the tablet screen toward Elijah inside the leaking apartment. The faded photograph beside Naomi's face looked almost identical. Same eyes. Same cheekbones. Same tiny crescent-shaped birthmark near the collarbone. Elijah's fingers tightened around his silver cane again. Outside, Vanessa's security guards were climbing the narrow staircase. Heavy footsteps echoed through the hallway. Gloria grabbed Naomi's wrist weakly from the bed. "Hide the picture," she whispered urgently. Naomi looked terrified. "Mama, what is happening?" Nobody answered immediately. Elijah stood slowly from the chair. "Marcus," he said calmly, "keep those men outside." Marcus nodded once before stepping toward the apartment door. Naomi watched everything with shaking hands. Her small room suddenly felt too small for all the secrets inside it. Gloria's weak breathing filled the silence. Elijah looked carefully at the old photograph again. The image showed a little black girl standing beside a woman near Lakewood Manor almost 20 years earlier. Half the picture had been burned away. "Who gave you this?" Elijah asked quietly. Naomi lowered her eyes. "My mother kept it hidden." Gloria closed her eyes painfully. "Because some truths destroy families." Another loud knock hit the door. "Open up," one of Vanessa's guards shouted. Marcus blocked the entrance firmly. "Mr. Elijah Reed is inside," he warned coldly. Silence followed instantly from the hallway. Naomi looked confused again. "Reed?" she whispered softly. The name clearly meant something to Gloria. Her eyes widened with fear. Elijah heard it immediately. You know my family. Gloria tried to sit up but started coughing hard instead. Naomi rushed to help her. A small metal box accidentally fell from beneath the blanket onto the floor. Everyone froze. Elijah slowly bent down and picked it up himself. Inside was an old hospital bracelet. A newborn record. And one missing name. Marcus immediately looked at the paper closer. "Sir," he whispered carefully. The birth file was altered. Naomi stepped backward in shock. "What are you talking about?" Elijah remained calm, but his face had changed. Something deeper now lived behind his silence. "Your mother worked at Lakewood Manor years ago," he said quietly. Gloria began crying weakly. "I promised never to speak." Naomi stared at her mother like the world beneath her feet had cracked open. "Speak about what?" Tiny hope appeared for one dangerous second. Elijah turned toward Marcus immediately. "Call Attorney Daniels. And get me the original hospital archive from St. Mary's." Marcus nodded fast. "Right away." Naomi looked overwhelmed. "Please stop," she whispered. "I do not understand any of this." Elijah finally looked directly toward her voice. "Neither do I," he admitted quietly. "But somebody erased your name from a record." Downstairs, rain continued hitting broken windows while black luxury cars slowly arrived outside the building. Vanessa Brooks stepped out herself this time wearing a long white coat. Furious. Controlled. Dangerous. She climbed the stairs slowly while speaking on the phone. "Do not let Elijah see the rest of those files," she hissed quietly. "Especially the Lakewood documents." Inside the apartment, Marcus reopened another digital archive. Security footage from Lakewood Manor appeared briefly on the screen. Old grainy footage. A woman carrying a crying child near the mansion gates years earlier. Then suddenly the video cut to black. The footage was erased, Marcus muttered. Elijah stepped closer immediately. "Play it again." Marcus replayed the clip slower this time. Naomi stared at the blurry woman frozen on screen. Her breath caught. The woman wore the exact same necklace Naomi still carried inside her torn bag. Silence swallowed the room. Gloria started trembling violently. "They said the child disappeared," she whispered through tears. "But she did not." Naomi slowly touched the necklace around her neck. "Mama," Elijah's expression hardened for the first time. Not cruel. Not angry. Suspicious. Deeply suspicious. A soft vibration suddenly came from Marcus's phone. He checked the message and looked up immediately. "Sir," he said carefully. "The original hospital file exists." Tiny hope flashed across Naomi's face. Then Marcus's expression darkened. "But one page is missing." At that exact moment, Vanessa opened the apartment door without permission. Her cold eyes landed directly on the necklace around Naomi's neck. And for the first time that night, Vanessa Brooks looked afraid. Vanessa Brooks stared directly at the necklace around Naomi Carter's neck while rainwater dripped from the edge of her white coat onto the apartment floor. Her face stayed calm for 1 second too long. Elijah Reed noticed immediately. "You recognize it," he said quietly. Vanessa laughed too fast. "It is cheap jewelry. Nothing more." Gloria began shaking violently in the hospital bed. "Do not lie," she whispered weakly. Vanessa's eyes flashed cold. "You should still remember who fed you for 20 years. Silence crushed the tiny apartment. Naomi looked between them in confusion and fear. Marcus slowly stepped closer to Elijah. "Sir," he whispered carefully, "the missing hospital page was removed manually." Elijah turned slightly toward Vanessa. "Who had access to the archive?" Vanessa crossed her arms tighter. "You are questioning me because of a beggar girl?" Naomi lowered her head instantly at the word beggar. The humiliation hit harder this time. Not outside a mansion gate. Inside her own home. In front of her sick mother. In front of the first man who had shown her kindness in years. Vanessa slowly walked closer to Naomi and looked directly at her worn clothes and trembling hands. "Tell him the truth," she said coldly. "You followed blind men for sympathy money." Naomi's eyes filled immediately. "That is not true." Vanessa cut her off sharply. "Then why did you hide that necklace?" Marcus suddenly spoke. "Because somebody was searching for it." Vanessa shot him a furious look. Elijah remained silent for several seconds before asking one quiet question. "Why were you afraid when you saw it?" Vanessa smiled again, but this time her voice sounded thinner. "Because desperate people create dangerous stories." Tiny hope appeared when Gloria suddenly reached beneath her pillow again. Her trembling fingers pulled out an old folded letter sealed in plastic. "I kept one copy," she whispered painfully. Naomi stared at her mother in shock. Vanessa moved instantly. "Do not open that." Too late. Marcus already took the letter carefully. The paper was old and stained by water damage. One name appeared clearly at the bottom. Eleanor Reed. Elijah froze completely. His dead mother's name. Naomi looked terrified now. "Mama, why do you have this?" Gloria cried silently. "Because your life was stolen before you could even speak." Heavy silence filled the room again. Even the rain outside sounded distant. Then Vanessa suddenly changed tactics. "Enough," she snapped loudly. "This woman is sick. She is confused. And that girl is using old lies to trap a billionaire." Social pressure hit instantly. The landlord peeked through the half-open door. Two neighbors whispered in the hallway. One person quietly started recording with a phone again. Naomi looked smaller with every second. Vanessa saw it and pushed harder. "You think rich families will accept street girls because of fake papers?" Naomi's breathing became uneven. "I never asked for money." "Then why are you still here?" Vanessa fired back. Elijah's voice finally cut through the apartment. Calm. Low. Dangerous. "Because I asked her to stay." Silence returned immediately. Tiny hope flickered again inside Naomi's eyes. Then Marcus unfolded the second page of the letter slowly. Half the document had been torn away. Another obstacle. Another missing piece. Vanessa relaxed slightly after seeing it. "There," she said quickly. "Incomplete lies." Elijah reached for the paper carefully. His fingers stopped near one sentence still visible through the damage. "Protect the child before they erase her name too." Elijah's jaw tightened. "Who is they?" Gloria suddenly looked terrified again instead of relieved. Her weak eyes moved toward the hallway. Someone else was standing outside the apartment door now. Listening. Marcus quietly opened the door fast, but the hallway was empty except for a small hospital envelope left on the floor. Inside was a copied birth document. Naomi picked it up with shaking hands. Her breath stopped instantly. The name on the paper was not Naomi Carter. Vanessa's face lost color for the first time. Elijah slowly turned toward her. "You knew," he said quietly. Vanessa immediately stepped backward. "That document is fake." But then a child's voice suddenly echoed from the hallway downstairs. "Mama," a little boy called innocently. "That lady in white said your real name is Naomi Reed." Silence exploded across the apartment. And Vanessa Brooks finally looked afraid enough to run. The little boy's voice still echoed through the apartment hallway. "That lady in white said your real name is Naomi Reed." Silence crushed the room so hard that even the rain outside seemed to stop breathing. Naomi Carter stood frozen beside the hospital bed while the copied birth paper shook violently inside her hands. Vanessa Brooks stepped backward first. Tiny movement. Tiny panic. Elijah Reed noticed everything. Why would a child know that name? He asked quietly. Vanessa forced a smile immediately. Children repeat nonsense. But her voice cracked slightly this time. Gloria began crying harder on the bed. I tried to protect her, she whispered painfully. Marcus moved closer to the old document. Sir, he said carefully, the seal on this paper matches St. Mary's original archive. Elijah slowly reached for the birth record himself. His fingers stopped over one line. Mother, Gloria Carter. Father, redacted. The room fell silent again. Naomi looked terrified. Why is the father's name missing? Nobody answered immediately. Then Marcus opened another file on his tablet. Grainy hospital camera footage appeared. Old footage. 23 years old. A woman leaving St. Mary's Hospital carrying a newborn child wrapped in a yellow blanket. Elijah leaned closer toward the screen. Vanessa suddenly stepped forward fast. That footage was destroyed years ago. Marcus looked up sharply. Destroyed by who? Vanessa realized her mistake too late. Emotional shock hit the apartment instantly. Naomi slowly looked toward Vanessa with trembling eyes. You knew about me. Vanessa's expression hardened again. I know desperate women create stories around rich families every day. Elijah remained calm, but his voice became colder now. Then explain why you tried to erase hospital files. Tiny hope flickered across Naomi's face for the first time. Then another obstacle hit immediately. Half the video suddenly glitched black. Missing footage again. Marcus cursed softly under his breath. The file was cut. Vanessa relaxed slightly after seeing it. Exactly, she replied quickly. Broken evidence. Broken lies. But then Gloria weakly pointed toward the screen with trembling fingers. Pause it, she whispered. Marcus froze the image carefully. The woman carrying the baby wore the exact same silver necklace Naomi still held around her neck. Silence swallowed the room again. Even Elijah's breathing changed slightly. Naomi touched the necklace slowly like it suddenly weighed too much to carry. Mama, Gloria closed her eyes in shame. That necklace belonged to Eleanor Reed. Elijah gripped the edge of the table hard enough for Marcus to notice. Eleanor. His late mother. First evidence had finally appeared clearly enough to wound everyone in the room. If you are watching this story right now, tell me in the comments, what do you think Vanessa Brooks is truly afraid of? And why was Naomi's real name hidden for so many years? Vanessa suddenly exploded. Enough, she shouted. You are all building fantasies around old jewelry and damaged tapes. Naomi flinched immediately at the sound of her voice. Social pressure returned fast. Neighbors whispered louder outside the apartment. Phones lifted again. Someone muttered, maybe she planned this. Naomi's shoulders dropped lower with every word. Vanessa saw the weakness and pressed harder. Do you really think billionaires lose children into poverty by accident? Elijah turned toward her slowly. That sounded very specific. Vanessa froze again. Tiny mistake. Tiny crack. Marcus immediately saved the paused camera frame onto his tablet. Sir, he whispered carefully, there is one more thing. He zoomed into the footage. Standing near the hospital exit in the background was another woman watching Gloria carry the baby away. The image was blurry. But the white coat was unmistakable. Vanessa's face lost color instantly. Naomi stared between the screen and Vanessa in disbelief. You were there, Vanessa stepped backward again. No. That image could be anyone. Tiny hope rose again when Elijah quietly reached for Naomi's shaking hand to steady the paper she was holding. Not romantic. Protective. Human. Nobody leaves this apartment tonight, he said firmly. Then another obstacle slammed into the room. Marcus's phone suddenly rang. He answered quickly before his face darkened completely. Sir, the original St. Mary archive room was broken into 20 minutes ago. Elijah straightened instantly. What was taken? Marcus swallowed hard. The final birth file. Vanessa slowly turned toward the apartment door again. Too calm now. Too ready. Elijah heard it immediately. You already knew, he said quietly. Before Vanessa could answer, another message arrived on Marcus's tablet. A hidden backup file had just been recovered. One image attached. A newborn footprint card. And beneath it, written clearly in faded ink for the first time in 23 years, was the name Naomi Reed. The newborn footprint card slipped from Marcus's trembling hand onto the small apartment table. Naomi Reed. The name sat there like a wound finally opening after years of silence. Nobody moved for several seconds. Elijah Reed slowly picked up the paper himself. He stared at the faded ink as if the room had disappeared around him. Vanessa Brooks watched his face carefully now. Fear had entered her eyes for the first time. It proves nothing, she said quickly. Old hospital mistakes happen every day. Elijah did not answer her immediately. Instead, he looked toward Naomi. She stood near the cracked kitchen wall holding her worn sweater tightly against herself like she expected someone to accuse her again. Tiny. Exhausted. Still shaking. When was the last time your mother ate? Elijah asked softly. Naomi blinked in confusion at the sudden question. Yesterday morning, she whispered. That answer hit harder than shouting. Gloria coughed violently from the hospital bed beside them. Marcus quietly stepped outside to make a phone call while Elijah removed his coat slowly and placed it across Gloria's legs. Small gesture. Careful gesture. Naomi immediately stepped forward. Please do not pity us. Elijah looked at her directly for the first time without distance. I do not pity you. Silence filled the room again. Vanessa hated it. She hated the softness entering the air. This woman manipulated you with tears, Vanessa snapped. She fed strangers on the street for attention. Naomi's eyes lowered immediately in shame. I never asked for anything, she whispered painfully. Elijah finally turned toward Vanessa. Calm face. Cold voice. Then why are you so desperate to silence her? Emotional pressure shifted slightly for the first time. Tiny rescue. Not salvation. Just one moment where Naomi was finally allowed to breathe. Marcus returned carrying a pharmacy bag and quietly handed medicine to Gloria. Naomi froze completely. We will repay this, she said quickly. Elijah shook his head once. Your mother needs treatment tonight. Naomi's eyes filled instantly, but she forced herself not to cry in front of him. She had begged too many people already. Outside the apartment window, black luxury cars waited beneath flickering streetlights while rainwater ran through broken pavement near the building entrance. Rich world. Poor world. Standing only feet apart now. Then another emotional spike hit. Little Isaiah stepped from the hallway clutching an old photo he had found inside Gloria's metal box. Mama Naomi, he said quietly, this man looks like Mr. Elijah. The room turned silent again. Marcus immediately took the picture. A younger Gloria stood beside an elegant older woman wearing the same silver necklace. And behind them stood a teenage Elijah Reed. Naomi stared at the image in disbelief. I have never seen that before. Elijah slowly reached for the photograph with visibly unsteady hands now. His thumb paused over his late mother's face. This picture was taken at the Reed Foundation Hospital opening, he murmured. Vanessa moved fast this time. Give me that photo. Elijah pulled it away before she could touch it. Small action. Sharp meaning. Vanessa noticed it immediately. "You are choosing a stranger over your own family?" she asked bitterly. Elijah's voice remained low. "I am choosing facts." Tiny hope flickered again across Naomi's face. Then obstacle returned instantly. Elijah's phone rang. He answered quietly while Marcus watched his expression darken. "What do you mean my father blocked archive access?" Elijah listened another moment before ending the call. Vanessa folded her arms slowly. Some truths destroy families. Naomi misunderstood the tension immediately. She stepped backward again. "I knew this would happen," she whispered. "Rich people always protect themselves first." Elijah looked at her sharply after hearing those words. Because someone else had once said that exact sentence years ago. Someone from his past. Someone connected to the missing child his mother searched for before she died. Emotional bond deepened silently in that moment. Not romance. Recognition. Gloria suddenly grabbed Naomi's wrist weakly from the bed. "Do not let them take the necklace," she whispered fearfully. Naomi looked confused. "Mama," Gloria's voice broke apart. "Your father made a promise that night." Elijah froze completely after hearing that sentence. Vanessa's face lost color again. Marcus slowly turned toward her. "You knew the father." Before anyone could speak again, a trembling voice came from the apartment doorway. An elderly nurse stood there soaked from the rain, clutching an old hospital folder tightly against her chest. Her lips shook as she stared directly at Elijah. "I know what happened that night." The elderly nurse stepped fully into the apartment, rainwater dripping from her coat onto the cracked floor tiles. Her hands shook so badly that the old hospital folder almost slipped from her fingers. Nobody spoke. Elijah Reed stared at her like he already feared the answer before hearing it. Vanessa Brooks quietly backed toward the hallway, but Marcus noticed immediately. "Do not leave," he said sharply. The nurse swallowed hard. "My name is Evelyn Carter," she whispered. "I worked at St. Mary Hospital 26 years ago." Naomi felt her chest tighten instantly. Gloria began crying weakly in the hospital bed. Old pain had entered the room before the truth even arrived. Evelyn slowly opened the folder. Inside were faded birth records, unsigned transfer forms, and an old photograph partially torn across the middle. Elijah stepped closer carefully. "What happened that night?" Evelyn looked directly at Naomi first. "Your mother came to the hospital carrying you in her arms during a storm." Naomi's eyes widened slowly. Gloria covered her mouth as tears rolled down her face. "She was begging for help," Evelyn continued softly. "But someone powerful wanted her removed before morning." Vanessa immediately interrupted. "This is nonsense." Her voice came too fast. Too loud. Elijah noticed. Marcus noticed. Even Naomi noticed now. Evelyn pulled out another paper with trembling hands. The original birth file disappeared 2 hours later. Silence crashed through the apartment. Tiny emotional shock. Bigger mystery. Elijah slowly took the paper himself. The name section had been damaged, but one line remained visible. "Father contact authorization, Reed Foundation Legal Office." Naomi looked confused. "What does that mean?" Nobody answered immediately. Elijah's jaw tightened slightly. Vanessa crossed her arms defensively. "The Reed Foundation helped thousands of people. That proves nothing." Then Evelyn revealed the next wound. Gloria was promised protection if she stayed silent. Gloria broke down completely now. "I was young," she cried painfully. "I thought they would destroy us." Naomi stared at her mother in disbelief. "Who promised you that?" Gloria could barely speak through tears. "A woman from the mansion." Elijah's expression darkened instantly. Old memory collided with present fear now. He remembered overhearing his late mother arguing with someone years ago about a missing child and falsified hospital records. Back then he was too young to understand. Now every broken memory felt sharper. Vanessa stepped closer aggressively. "You are confusing grief with truth." Evelyn flinched immediately. Fear still controlled her after all these years. "I should not even be here," she whispered. People lost jobs after asking questions. Emotional contrast deepened around the room. Luxury power. Poor silence. Fear surviving decades. Naomi slowly sat down beside her mother, overwhelmed completely now. "All my life," her voice cracked, "people treated us like we were dirty." Gloria grabbed her hand tightly. "I was trying to protect you." Elijah quietly looked at the old photograph again. This time he noticed someone had been torn from the edge of the image. Only part of a diamond bracelet remained visible on the missing section. Vanessa subtly looked away. Marcus noticed that too. Tiny hope arrived seconds later. Elijah handed the folder back carefully. "Nobody touches these documents again," he said calmly. "I will verify every record myself." Naomi looked up slowly after hearing that. For the first time, she believed someone powerful might actually listen. But the obstacle came immediately after. Elijah's phone rang again. Marcus answered first this time. His face changed instantly. "Sir," he said carefully. "Your father ordered all St. Mary archives sealed tonight." Vanessa exhaled quietly in relief. Too quietly. Elijah turned toward her immediately. "Why are you smiling?" She froze. Nobody moved. Then Evelyn nervously reached deeper into the folder and removed a yellowed envelope sealed with the old Reed family crest. "There is more," she whispered fearfully. "But I was told never to open this letter unless the child survived." Naomi stared at the envelope with trembling hands. Elijah slowly noticed the handwriting across the front. It belonged to his dead mother. Before anyone could speak again, Gloria suddenly grabbed Naomi's arm painfully tight and whispered through tears, "Do not trust her." Her eyes shifted toward Vanessa. The entire room went cold. And Elijah finally realized the woman he had been searching for all these years might already be standing in front of him. Vanessa Brooks did not wait for sunrise. By morning, the trap had already begun. Naomi Reed arrived at the Reed Foundation mansion after receiving an urgent message claiming Gloria's hospital treatment had been cancelled. The moment she stepped through the giant marble entrance, dozens of wealthy guests, family members, and Foundation board executives turned toward her at once. Too many eyes. Too much silence. Naomi stopped walking immediately. She sensed danger before anyone spoke. Then Vanessa stood from the head dining table holding the old yellow envelope from Elijah's mother. "There she is," Vanessa announced coldly. "The woman who stole private Reed family documents." Gasps spread across the room instantly. Naomi's face lost color. "No," she whispered. "I never touched that letter." Vanessa laughed softly. "Then why was it found inside your bag?" A security guard placed Naomi's worn cloth bag onto the long dining table. The yellow envelope sat inside it beside her cracked phone and medicine receipts. Naomi stared in horror. "Someone put it there." Nobody answered. Phones slowly lifted around the room. Rich guests whispered behind diamond glasses and expensive suits. "She planned this from the beginning. These poor girls always want money." She fooled Elijah Reed. Emotional humiliation hit harder than before because now the entire elite family circle watched her fall. Elijah had not arrived yet. Vanessa made sure of that. Marcus was delayed at the hospital after receiving a false emergency call. Naomi stood alone again. Exactly how Vanessa wanted it. "Sign this statement," Vanessa ordered sharply, sliding papers across the table. "Admit you manipulated an old nurse and fabricated this story for money." Naomi's hands trembled violently. I will not lie. Vanessa leaned closer. Then your mother loses treatment tonight. Silence exploded inside Naomi's chest. Gloria's oxygen machine. Hospital debt. Isaiah sleeping hungry. Everything pressed against her at once. Vanessa lowered her voice cruelly. People like you survive by begging. Do not pretend dignity matters now. Tears filled Naomi's eyes, but she still pushed the paper away slowly. I fed a blind man because he was hungry, she whispered painfully. Not because I wanted this. Another emotional spike hit when one of the executives suddenly stood up. Then explain why you were hiding Reed family evidence. Naomi tried to speak again, but Vanessa interrupted immediately. Because she knew exactly who Elijah was before meeting him. The crowd reacted instantly. More whispers. More suspicion. Tiny hope flickered briefly when Isaiah suddenly stepped forward clutching the silver necklace tightly in his small hands. Mama Naomi cries every night, he said innocently. Bad people keep scaring her. The room softened for 1 second. 1 second only. Vanessa quickly turned the moment around. Children repeat whatever adults teach them. Social pressure crushed the tiny hope immediately. Naomi looked around desperately, but nobody defended her. Not the board members. Not the guests. Not the servant standing quietly against the wall. Then another obstacle struck. Evelyn Carter entered the mansion doorway surrounded by legal staff. Fear covered her face. Vanessa smiled instantly after seeing her. Tell them the truth, Vanessa demanded. Evelyn's lips trembled. She glanced toward Naomi apologetically. I may have remembered some things incorrectly. Naomi's heart shattered visibly. Vanessa had reached the witness first. Emotional collapse spread across the room. Naomi suddenly looked completely alone again. Yet Elijah's absence itself began feeling strange now. Too controlled. Too deliberate. Vanessa continued confidently. This ends today. She turned toward the guests proudly. The Reed family will not be blackmailed by strangers. Then Naomi noticed something small. Marcus had quietly entered the back hallway without anyone seeing him. He gave her the slightest nod before disappearing again. Tiny Hope returned silently. Naomi lowered her eyes and noticed Isaiah still holding the silver necklace. The clasp had opened slightly during the chaos. Inside the hidden compartment rested a tiny folded photograph. Naomi carefully slipped it into her sleeve before Vanessa noticed. Obstacle came immediately afterward. Security guards moved closer. Escort her out, Vanessa ordered. Naomi's voice broke completely now. Please, my mother needs help. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Vanessa smiled faintly like she had finally won. Then the giant mansion doors slowly opened behind the crowd. Every conversation stopped. Elijah Reed stepped inside wearing a dark tailored coat, his expression unreadable. Marcus followed beside him carrying a black evidence case. Behind them, workers rolled in a large digital screen connected to recovered security footage. Vanessa's smile remained on her face. But for the first time that night, fear entered her eyes. The giant mansion doors closed slowly behind Elijah Reed as silence swallowed the entire dining hall. Nobody moved. Nobody even touched their glasses anymore. The large digital screen stood dark beside the marble staircase while Marcus placed the black evidence case carefully onto the long table. Naomi Reed remained near the doorway surrounded by security guards, clutching Isaiah tightly beside her. She looked exhausted. Humiliated. Cornered. Yet for the first time that night, she was not being forced outside. Elijah's calm presence alone changed the room's temperature. Vanessa Brooks recovered first. She straightened her designer jacket and forced a cold smile. Elijah, she said smoothly, this woman manipulated an old nurse and stole family records. We were handling it. Elijah never looked at her immediately. Instead, he walked toward Naomi slowly. The room watched every step. Naomi lowered her eyes, ashamed again despite everything. Elijah stopped beside her and quietly said, "She stays." Tiny hope moved through the room instantly. Vanessa's smile tightened. "You are embarrassing this family in front of the board." Elijah finally turned toward her. "Truth does not embarrass families. Lies do." Emotional silence crashed through the mansion. Several guests lowered their phones immediately. Others whispered nervously now instead of confidently. Vanessa noticed the shift and reacted fast. "Then show your proof," she challenged sharply. "Or stop protecting strangers." Elijah calmly opened the black evidence case. Inside rested hospital records, recovered surveillance files, the silver necklace, and the yellow envelope carrying his late mother's handwriting. Nobody breathed normally anymore. Naomi stared at the envelope like it still frightened her. Marcus connected a drive to the giant screen, but the footage had not started yet. Tension stretched painfully through the hall. Evelyn Carter stood near the staircase trembling visibly. She looked terrified to even remain there. Vanessa noticed her fear immediately. "Careful what you say," she warned softly. "False testimony destroys lives." Evelyn almost stepped backward. Another emotional spike. Elijah noticed and spoke calmly without raising his voice. "Nobody will threaten witnesses in this house again." Public silence followed instantly. Naomi looked at him slowly after hearing those words. She still did not fully trust safety. Not yet. But something inside her began softening. Then another obstacle appeared. Harold Reed entered the dining hall unexpectedly. Elijah's father. Powerful. Cold. The room shifted immediately. "What is this circus?" Harold demanded. Vanessa exhaled in relief. "Finally." Harold looked directly at Naomi with visible disgust. "Remove her before this damages the family name further." Naomi's hands tightened around Isaiah instinctively. Old fear returned immediately. Elijah stepped between them without aggression. Quiet authority. "Nobody leaves." Harold's eyes narrowed. "You are choosing a beggar over blood." Elijah answered calmly. "I am choosing facts over fear." Crowd tension deepened again. Even the wealthy board members looked uncertain now. Tiny hope flickered stronger when Marcus quietly handed Elijah a restored hospital archive folder marked confidential. Vanessa noticed the seal and visibly froze for half a second. Elijah noticed that too. Then Isaiah suddenly tugged Naomi's sleeve gently. "Mama Naomi," he whispered loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, "why is that lady scared of the necklace?" Several heads turned toward Vanessa instantly. Sharp emotional shift. Vanessa immediately snapped back. "Children imagine nonsense." Yet her voice cracked slightly this time. "If you are watching this story right now, comment below who you believe deserves justice after everything Naomi has suffered." Because inside that mansion, people were finally starting to question the lies they accepted for years. Elijah slowly removed the hidden photograph from the necklace compartment. He placed it carefully beside the torn image from Gloria's box. Together, the two halves completed one picture. The room collectively gasped. A younger Gloria stood beside Elijah's late mother holding a newborn baby wrapped in hospital cloth. The baby bracelet showed one clear name, Naomi. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Vanessa suddenly moved toward the photographs aggressively. "That proves nothing." Elijah stopped her with one calm sentence. "Then why did someone tear your face out of the original picture?" Public silence became unbearable. Vanessa's breathing changed instantly. Harold Reed looked sharply toward her now for the first time with suspicion instead of confidence. Tiny hope exploded quietly across Naomi's face, but obstacle struck again before relief could settle. Harold slammed his hand onto the table. Enough. No more accusations without complete evidence. Elijah slowly nodded. Agreed. He turned toward Marcus. Play the footage. The giant screen flickered once but paused before the video fully loaded. Everyone stared forward now. Evelyn Carter stepped beside the table trembling violently. Naomi held Isaiah closer. Vanessa looked toward the exit like she was calculating escape for the first time. Then Elijah picked up the yellow envelope from his mother and said quietly, "Before you judge her, watch this." The screen finally lit up. The giant screen finally came alive. Static flickered once across the mansion wall before the hospital security footage appeared clearly. Every guest stared forward in complete silence. Naomi Reed froze beside Isaiah. Elijah Reed stood motionless with the yellow envelope still in his hand. On the screen, an older recording showed Gloria Carter walking through St. Mary Hospital 23 years earlier carrying a newborn baby wrapped in a faded blanket. The timestamp matched the exact date printed inside the confidential archive file. Then another figure entered the footage. Vanessa Brooks. Younger. Nervous. Looking over her shoulder before handing Gloria a thick envelope. A sharp wave of whispers exploded across the room. "Pause it," Harold Reed suddenly ordered. Elijah never looked away from the screen. No, the footage continued. Vanessa could now be heard faintly through restored audio. The family must never know. Public silence crashed into the mansion. Phones slowly lowered one by one. Naomi's breathing became uneven. Isaiah held her hand tighter. Vanessa stepped forward immediately. "That recording is edited." Her voice shook now. Marcus calmly opened the restored hospital records beside the screen. "The metadata confirms the original source," he said. "No alterations." Emotional tension deepened instantly. Elijah removed the second photograph from the necklace compartment and held it beside the screen. The same silver blanket pattern appeared in both images. The same newborn bracelet. The same name. Naomi. Someone near the dining table whispered, "Oh my God." Naomi lowered her eyes as tears finally slipped down her face. She had spent years feeding strangers with the little food she had left while being treated like dirt herself. Now the room that laughed at her sat frozen. Vanessa pointed directly at Naomi in panic. "She planned this. She used that old nurse." Evelyn Carter stepped forward trembling violently. "No," she whispered. Nobody interrupted her now. "I carried that baby myself." Another emotional spike hit the room. Harold Reed slowly turned toward Evelyn. "What are you saying?" Evelyn's hands shook harder. Her mother worked for this family. She was sent away after the accident. Naomi stared upward slowly. "My mother?" Her voice barely existed anymore. Elijah opened the yellow envelope carefully. Inside rested a handwritten letter from his late mother. He read calmly despite the tension crushing the room. "If anything happens to me, protect the child. Her name must remain hidden until she is safe." Dead silence. Vanessa's face completely drained of color. Elijah looked directly at her now for the first time with cold certainty. "You knew." Vanessa shook her head desperately. "Your mother was confused. She was sick." Elijah immediately placed another document onto the table. Hospital transfer records. Signed by Vanessa Brooks herself. The date matched the night Naomi disappeared from the Reed family estate as an infant. Public shock spread visibly through every corner of the mansion. "You sold the lie for 23 years, Marcus said quietly. And erased her identity." Naomi looked like the floor beneath her no longer existed. Tears rolled silently down her face while Isaiah hugged her waist tightly. "Mama, Naomi is not bad, the little boy suddenly said into the silence. That single sentence broke the room emotionally. Even several wealthy guests lowered their heads in shame now. Elijah stepped closer to Naomi protectively. Nobody calls her a liar again. Vanessa's panic exploded openly now. You do not understand, she shouted. I protected this family. Elijah's voice stayed calm. From what? Silence answered him first. Then Evelyn spoke again with visible fear. The child was never supposed to disappear. Vanessa took the inheritance documents herself. Another wave of gasps filled the mansion. Harold Reed looked toward Vanessa slowly like he no longer recognized her. Naomi finally understood why her mother spent years hiding, starving, and running from place to place. Her entire life had been stolen before she could even speak. Emotional devastation flooded her face silently. Elijah carefully placed the birth certificate in front of Harold. The surname line read clearly, Reed. Nobody moved anymore. Nobody whispered anymore. Vanessa suddenly backed away from the table. This family will collapse if this comes out. Elijah looked directly into her eyes. No. Only your lies will. Public silence became unbearable again. Then Marcus quietly slid one final sealed document across the table. Harold opened it slowly with trembling hands. His face changed instantly. The document confirmed Naomi as the legal heir named in Elijah's late mother's private trust. Vanessa stopped breathing for half a second. Naomi stared at the paper in disbelief. And Elijah asked the final question that shattered the room completely. Tell them, Vanessa. His voice turned colder now. Why did you really destroy Naomi's life? Vanessa Brooks could not answer. The entire mansion stared at her in complete silence while Elijah Reed stood unmoving beside the table of evidence. The restored hospital file remained open. Naomi's birth certificate rested beside the old necklace and the faded photograph that had hidden the truth for more than 20 years. Vanessa's breathing became uneven. You do not understand what I sacrificed, she whispered weakly. Nobody defended her now. Harold Reed slowly stepped away from her like the truth itself had become poison. You stole a child from this family, he said quietly. Vanessa shook her head immediately. I protected our name. By destroying hers? Elijah asked. His voice stayed calm, but the disappointment inside it felt heavier than anger. Emotional silence crushed the room again. Naomi stood frozen with tears filling her eyes while Isaiah held tightly onto her old sweater. The little boy looked around at the wealthy guests who once mocked her. Nobody laughed anymore. Nobody whispered anymore. Marcus handed the final legal folder directly to Harold. The trust transfer was blocked illegally, he explained. Miss Naomi Reed was erased from every inheritance record. Shock spread visibly across the guests. One woman lowered her phone in shame. Another guest quietly muttered, she fed a blind beggar while living like this? Vanessa suddenly pointed at Naomi again desperately. She came here for money. Naomi finally spoke after hours of humiliation. Her voice trembled softly. If I wanted money, I would not have spent my last dollars feeding strangers. That sentence broke something inside the room completely. Evelyn Carter covered her mouth and began crying openly. Harold Reed slowly looked at Naomi again. All these years, he whispered. Elijah stepped forward protectively beside Naomi. Nobody humiliates her again. Vanessa's composure collapsed fully now. I did it for this family, she shouted. Your mother would have ruined everything. Elijah immediately opened the handwritten letter again. He read the final line aloud before everyone. Love without compassion destroys every home. Silence. Absolute silence. Harold closed his eyes painfully. Then he turned toward Vanessa with visible disappointment. You will step down from every family position effective immediately. Gasps spread across the mansion. Vanessa looked horrified. Harold, enough. His voice finally hardened. You lied to this family for 23 years. Another emotional spike hit the crowd. Guests who once praised Vanessa now slowly turned away from her. The wealthy relatives who laughed at Naomi earlier could not even meet her eyes anymore. Marcus calmly collected the evidence files. The legal department will restore Miss Naomi Reed's identity records immediately. Vanessa looked toward the guests desperately for support, but nobody moved. Nobody defended her. Even the mansion staff stood silently watching. One elderly maid wiped tears from her face quietly. Naomi still looked overwhelmed. She had walked into this mansion as a poor woman carrying old bread in a worn paper bag. Now the same people who mocked her stared at her with guilt and shock. Isaiah tugged softly on her sleeve. "Mama Naomi," he whispered. "You are not alone anymore." Tears rolled freely down Naomi's face now. Elijah carefully picked up the necklace from the evidence table and handed it back to her with both hands. "This was always yours," he said softly. Vanessa suddenly broke down completely. "I was afraid," she whispered. "If the truth came out, I would lose everything." Harold answered her quietly without cruelty. "And she lost everything because of you." Public shame settled over Vanessa heavier than any punishment. No screaming. No revenge. Just truth standing in the center of the room where lies used to live. Elijah then faced the guests calmly. "Miss Naomi Reed will receive full restoration of her legal identity, inheritance protection, and family recognition." Nobody objected. Nobody dared. Emotional relief spread slowly across Naomi's trembling face, but the pain inside her eyes still remained. Too many years had been stolen. Too many nights hungry. Too many doors closed in her face. Yet for the first time in years, nobody was calling her worthless anymore. Harold carefully approached Naomi with tears in his own eyes. "I cannot return your lost years," he admitted. "But this family will correct what was done." Naomi lowered her head silently. She could not even speak yet. Elijah then looked toward the mansion entrance where rain still touched the marble stairs outside. "Prepare the east wing," he ordered calmly. "And contact St. Mary Hospital. Her mother will receive full treatment tonight." Naomi looked up slowly in shock. Evelyn began crying harder. Isaiah smiled for the first time all night. Then Elijah gently placed the restored Reed family documents into Naomi's trembling hands and said the words that made her completely break down in tears. "You are finally home." Naomi stood frozen beneath the mansion lights while the restored Reed family documents trembled in her hands. "You are finally home." Elijah's words still echoed through the silent hall. Nobody laughed anymore. Nobody looked at her with disgust anymore. The same people who once watched her beg beside the mansion gate now stepped aside quietly as the grand doors slowly opened before her. Emotional relief hit Naomi so deeply that she could barely breathe. Isaiah wrapped his small arms around her waist tightly. "Mama Naomi," he whispered softly, "does this mean we do not have to sleep hungry again?" Tears filled her eyes instantly. She knelt slowly and kissed his forehead. "No, baby," she whispered back. "Not again." Inside the east wing of the mansion, warm lights replaced the cold marble silence from earlier that night. Doctors from St. Mary Hospital arrived quietly to help Evelyn Carter. For the first time in years, her coughing finally eased under proper care. Naomi stood beside the hospital bed in disbelief as a nurse handed her the medicine bill stamped fully paid. She stared at the paper for several seconds without speaking. Elijah remained near the doorway respectfully. Calm. Quiet. Protective. "Your mother will stay here until she recovers," he said softly. Naomi looked at him carefully like she still could not believe kindness was real. "Why are you helping me?" Elijah's eyes lowered briefly toward the old silver necklace in her hands. "Because somebody should have done it years ago. Silence filled the room again, but this time it felt warm instead of cruel. Days later, the mansion felt different. The servants greeted Naomi with respect. The staff who once ignored her now smiled gently when Isaiah ran through the garden laughing for the first time in months. Harold Reed publicly restored Naomi's legal identity before the family board and announced the reopening of the Community Food Foundation under her name. Emotional dignity slowly returned to her life piece by piece. Not through revenge. Through truth. Vanessa Brooks disappeared from every family event afterward. No shouting. No dramatic punishment. Just empty chairs and silent consequences. The lies that once gave her power had taken everything from her instead. One afternoon, Naomi entered the mansion library alone. Sunlight touched the old photograph resting beside the handwritten letter Elijah's mother once hid for her protection. Naomi carefully placed the silver necklace beside the frame. The object that once carried pain and fear no longer felt heavy anymore. It finally felt like proof that her life mattered. Isaiah climbed into the chair beside her and pointed at the photo. "That was you?" he asked innocently. Naomi smiled through tears. "Yes. You look sad there." She touched his cheek gently. "I was waiting for the truth." Emotional peace slowly settled into the mansion. Elijah never forced closeness. Never demanded gratitude. He simply stayed near whenever Naomi needed help. Sometimes they spoke quietly in the garden at night while Isaiah slept nearby. Sometimes silence was enough. One evening, Naomi stood near the mansion gate where guards once pushed her away in the rain. The memory still hurt. Her faded old work bag rested in her hands beside the restored Reed family documents. Elijah stepped beside her calmly. "You do not have to carry that bag anymore," he said softly. Naomi looked down at it for a moment before answering. "I keep it to remember who I was." Elijah nodded slowly. "Then keep it with pride." Her eyes filled again. Not from humiliation this time. From healing. A few nearby staff members lowered their heads respectfully as she passed them. The same crowd that once whispered about the poor woman feeding a blind beggar now spoke about her kindness with shame and admiration. Isaiah suddenly ran across the garden laughing loudly. "Mama Naomi! Come see my room." His voice echoed through the mansion with pure joy. Naomi looked toward him and smiled fully for the first time in the story. Real peace. Real safety. Real home. Before following Isaiah inside, she turned once more toward the old mansion gate. The place where her humiliation began now stood behind her quietly. Elijah remained beside her without speaking. And Naomi finally understood something bigger than money, inheritance, or status. A person can lose a name. A home. Even years of life. But truth does not disappear forever. Kindness does not stay invisible forever. And people who mock the poor often never realize whose story they are stepping on. She gently held the silver necklace one last time before walking through the open mansion doors beside the people who finally saw her worth. Because the truth may be delayed. But it can never stay buried forever. And one act of kindness can change a life before the world even knows who you really are.